Well, good morning, Foundations. How's everyone doing? So excited for everyone tuning in from Windsor. We are so excited that you're like a church now. Last time I was here, you were just doing like a practice service. Now, aren't we thrilled of what God's doing at Windsor? It's just incredible. Incredible. Everyone else tuning in online. If you don't know me, my name is Steve Carter, and I really, really love this church. I feel like God is just stirring here, and it's always an honor to come. I flew in Friday and basically Ubered straight to Canvas Stadium. There was about 1,000 of us there to watch Colorado State play close, and they lost to Boise State. There was like one Boise State fan. And then Saturday, I dressed up in full Michigan gear, and I showed up to Pastor Carl's house, and we watched my team get destroyed for the 8th year in a row. You can sit up front. You need Jesus. But here's the thing: I watched this, and your pastor, when his team scores, he can dance. He can dance. A little awkward, but he can dance. He gets excited. But hey, we're super excited that you're here. Kick off this brand new series called The Light Has Come. And when I was a kid, I grew up in this city called Camarillo, California. It's an amazing little city, kind of between Malibu and Santa Barbara, Ventura County. And we had two airports. We had one kind of a little private airport for Cessnas and business women and men for their CEO jets that they could just fly in and out, so they didn't have to drive the hour and a half to LA. And then we also had a base, an Army base, Point Mugu. And oftentimes when President Ronald Reagan was in office, he had a vacation home in Santa Barbara. And so he would fly in to this Army base, Point Mugu, and then he would have a motorcade that would take him the 30 or so minutes to Santa Barbara. And whenever this happened, our city got so excited. I mean, the president was in town. And there'd be American flags everywhere. The city never was cleaner. I mean, people were so excited. And I remember one day, it was a Saturday morning, and I was playing soccer, and we had just won. I still remember that. And we're driving home, my dad and I, and he's listening to Billy Joel. We didn't start the fire. And I remember this moment where there was all of these police officers, and they wouldn't let us pass through the intersection. And so my dad didn't want to wait, and so he kind of flips a U-turn and begins to kind of speed over to another intersection, kind of around, and there's more police officers. And then he realizes, President Reagan must be coming. And so he tells me, get out of the car. I want you to go stand on that corner, and when you see a motorcade of cars, just wave, and maybe President Reagan might wave back. I was like, okay. And so I'm standing there on the corner by myself, I'm wearing my soccer gear, my shin guards, and I'm there just waving. I don't even know what I'm waving at. I'm just 8 years old, just Miss America pageant right here, just waving. And literally, all of a sudden, this motorcade comes. And my dad's like, here he comes, keep waving. And so I'm like, okay, and I'm waving. And then the window goes down, and President Reagan just looks at me, and he waves. And I waved back, and I think I probably said something like, say hi to Nancy for me, and then he just drove on. And Reagan was a big deal in our little area. His presidential library was about 15 minutes from my house, and obviously he was the governor of California for a number of years. But I started thinking about this. Whenever a president is going to go somewhere, whether on vacation, whether to the Middle East, whether to Asia, whether just to a certain state to kind of, meet with potential donors or city officials. He's got a team, and the entire team kind of looks at his calendar. And they look at the calendar, and they say, okay, you want to go here. All right, we're going to book this out. And then it moves to a security detail, and then the security detail, months in advance, go there, and they begin to just check out, where's he going to stay? How is he going to get from the airport to where he wants to go? How long will he be at this meeting? Then where will he go? And this whole team's job is to make sure that the president gets from point A to point B in the safest and most efficient way possible. And this is happening all of the time. But it's not just unique for presidents. This has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. And I'm going to take you back to what I believe was John the Baptist's life verse. This was the verse that got him up in the morning. It was his mission statement. It's why he believed he existed on this planet. And really what you're going to see is that John the Baptist was a herald. And in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3, you begin to see, just so beautifully written, this prophecy, this truth about what a herald would do. It says this, there is a voice of one calling, in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. So here's what you need to know, is that a herald was someone who would go before the king, and this herald would go out and basically share the good news. The king is coming. And you got to understand, in the ancient Near East, there was a season for battle where the kings would go out. Months and months of the year, they'd go out to battle, to fight with other nations. But then, somehow there was this agreement that there were certain months where no nation went to battle. And so, kings then would go to certain jurisdictions, certain cities where there might be duress, certain cities where they hadn't been, where they needed to curry favor. And so what they would do is they would send these heralds. And these heralds would go out, one, to get the city ready, to get the province ready, but two, to ensure that the king got to where the king wanted to go in the most safe and efficient way possible. But then look what it says, verse 4. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain. And the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all the people will see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. And this is what John the Baptist did. And John the Baptist was a unique cat. I mean, the guy wore like clothes made out of camel skin. He ate locusts, like grasshoppers, mixed with a little bit of honey. He wasn't speaking at the temple. He was out in the wilderness, and he was calling people to prepare their hearts and their minds, their lives, and to live with anticipation that the king was coming. And he didn't want them to miss it. He didn't want them to get distracted. But here's the thing. If you're like me, isn't it fascinating how you can go through the Christmas season and you can get to December 26th and you just feel exhausted? You feel overwhelmed. And if you're really, really honest, you feel like you missed Christ in the season. You were going to so many meetings. I mean, you gave Thursday as a day of gratitude, and then by the time you went to bed, it turned to Black Friday, and you were driving into the Walmart parking lot, and it felt like the Daytona 500. People fighting over gifts. And then Saturday, Small Business Saturday. Monday, Cyber Monday. Tuesdays, when you give to nonprofits. We feel just so overwhelmed. Our schedules are packed. We're trying to keep everybody happy. And there have been so many Christmas seasons. And I'm a pastor. And I get to December 26th, and I'm like, I'm just so grateful it's over. Like I just so much. And I've sat with many people, and they feel the same thing. And so I'm coming to you as a herald. I'm coming to you to say this is the Advent season. Today kicks off the Advent season. And if you didn't grow up kind of celebrating Advent, Advent for me is just this beautiful mathematic formula. It's just preparation plus anticipation. This is where we prepare our hearts, our minds, our lives to be ready for the King's arrival. And oftentimes we think of Advent as just remembering when Christ came, but the truth is Christ wants to meet with every single one of us in this season. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is simply this: are we ready for the King's arrival? Do our lives have the margin and the space to experience all that the King wants to do in and through us? And so a herald's job simply is basically to go before the King and get the city, get the people ready. But when the herald goes out, the herald's going to inspect the topography. And you're going to see valleys, you're going to see mountains, you're going to see edges that this herald wants to actually deal with. And so what I want to do is walk through verse 4. Because the truth be told, I think we all have some valleys and mountains and edges that are preventing us from experiencing the fullness of what the King wants to do in us and through us in this season. So let's begin in verse 4. It says this: every valley shall be raised up. Now, I know northern Colorado is known as the high desert. I live in the low desert. I live in a valley. And if you've ever been to Israel, you've probably experienced walking through kind of a valley area. You know Psalm 23. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And these valleys are these desert spaces. And they're often known as wadis, W-A-D-I. And what happens is when it rains, the ground is so dry, it can't absorb the heavy rains. And so the water finds a wadi, it finds a valley, and it literally will take out the trail or it will take out the road. And so a herald, if their job is to ensure that the king gets from point A to point B in the safest and most efficient way, has to inspect where are their washes. Where could there be a valley where a road basically gives way and the king gets stuck? And the king gets stuck, then they can't get to where they need to go. And I started thinking about this because I live in Phoenix. And in Phoenix, man, it can rain. It was raining really, really hard. You all got snow. We got rain. And when it rains, it can be dangerous. I know this personally because one of the most moving moments of my life happened a number of years ago. I drove from Southern California when I was in college to Arizona to take my now wife out on our first date. And I drove out there and I took her to a Mexican restaurant because God's heart is in chips and salsa and guacamole. And so we had this great meal and we begin to drive to this little city called Fountain Hills. And I had been like really nervous. I was going to tell her how I felt. And I had thought about what I wanted to say. So I kind of pull the car over and I just say, hey. And as I begin to speak, it just begins to rain. I don't mean like little piddle-paddle like rain. I mean torrential rain, which isn't great foreshadowing. But as it's raining super hard, I lay my heart out. If you know me, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I can't fake it. And so I just put everything into this. And I think I even quoted a poem. I mean, I'm laying it out. And I get done with basically telling her how I feel. And I just look at her and I go, where are you at? And she says nothing. And it's raining. And I'm like 15 seconds, which feels like an eternity. And she's still quiet. We're at a minute now. And she's still quiet. And she's an artist and she's a deep feeler and she doesn't like being put on the spot. And so I'm sitting here going, oh man, like I quoted a poem. Like how, like what's like this is awkward. And for 5 minutes it's silent. And finally I'm like, all right, well I guess I'm just gonna drive you home. So I turn the car on and I drive her 25 minutes to her house. And to get to her house, she lives out on a ranch in like desert mountainous area of like Scottsdale. And as I'm driving out there, I'm going through these dirt roads and water is just flowing through. And I'm like just barely getting to her house. And I was like, well, thanks for everything. Hope you have a great life. And I drop her off and just like, how did I get this so wrong? And I start to drive out of her dirt driveway and I turn onto the road and my car gets stuck in a wash that I had no idea what a wash is, but the road had given way. And now I'm going to be either creepy guy who's sleeping in her driveway, or I have to have the walk of shame and knock on her house and be like, hey, I got stuck in a wash. I'm just going to sleep in my car. And so I walk out, I knock on the door, and her mom opens the door, and I kind of explain what had happened. She's like, no, come on in. I'm like, no, that's going to be really awkward. I'll just sleep in the van. And she's like, you're not sleeping in the van. I'm like, here's the deal. You don't know me. I just poured out my heart to your daughter. She doesn't like me. I think it's probably more comfortable for me to sleep in the van. She's like, no, it's not. You're going to sleep over here. And so they bring me into the guest room over in this house, and I'm like, this is the most awkward moment of my life. When my guy friends hear about this, they will never let me live it down. And so I'm just sitting there going, how did this happen? And I hear this knock on the door. And I open it up, and it's Sarah, my now wife. And she hands me this canvas folder. And it's painted. And I didn't grow up in a Christian home. And I'm looking at it, and it's got kind of these verses on it. And I open up the folder, and there's about 70, 80 pages of these artistically painted prayers. And she's like, maybe this might help you understand. And so I just start reading them. And they were prayers over me since the first time we met. And they were prayers not that we'd get together. They were prayers that God would use me, that God would bless me, that God would bless my gift. They were these amazing prayers. And I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I didn't have parents praying over me. And I'm reading this, and I get done with it. And I'm thinking earlier, man, I put my heart and soul in like 3 minutes of like, and she's painted for like months and months. And I get done with this, and I'm like, so you do like me? And she's like, I think so. And I just remember this. Every time I think of and read in the scriptures a valley, I think about getting stuck in one. And when I think about valleys really symbolize unexpected loss. He didn't think that the road would just wash away. And a herald has to have the eyes to see this is a wash. And if it starts raining, it could be really, really dangerous for the king to arrive where the king wants to go. And here's the truth. Every one of you have experienced in your lifetime a valley. Unexpected loss. I just experienced this recently when I was talking with someone, and they came up to me and they said, hey, I thought everything was going well at work. And then some numbers weren't made, and my boss came in and said, hey, I'm so sorry. I don't want to have to do this, but you only have 3 more weeks left. And he's like, we're going into the holiday season. What is that? Unexpected loss. Maybe for some of you, you've experienced just this sense of sitting at Thanksgiving table, and you're there, and you're looking at one seat, and for the first time, that seat isn't filled with a dear loved one, either because they chose to walk out or because their life came to an end. And you were like, unexpected. I did not see that coming. And for some of us, we hold these valleys. And the truth is, if we don't actually allow God into those valleys, we're going to just try and cover them up. In the holiday season, we can make ourselves over busy. We can overeat, we can overcompensate, we can look for ways to deal with the valley and miss out on what God wants to do in and through us. But it's not just the valleys that the herald is looking for. Look what it continues to say in verse 4. Every mountain and hill made low. So hey, every valley that they see, they're going to lift them up, and every mountain and hill that they see that could be dangerous. And again, if you've ever been to the Middle East and you've experienced some of these hills and mountains, they can be dangerous because there can be enemies who are behind these curves and these bends. And the herald's got to say, hey, that's not strategically safe for the king. I remember the day on which I got married. I took my groomsmen, and we were in Phoenix where we got married, and we hiked Camelback Mountain. It's an amazing mountain. If you've never done it, you should do it. And guys are just always looking for competition. And so we saw this big rock, and we decided to take some smaller rocks from the trail and began to see how many of us could hit the big rock. We did a little competition. First person to 5 was the winner. And so we're just going for it. We're just throwing these rocks. There's probably about 12 of us just going for it. And all of a sudden, some person walks by and goes, hey, if you keep throwing those rocks, there's going to be no trail. Which my buddy quickly responded, yeah, there will. It'll just be over there, which I thought was hilarious. Now, here's the thing. You got to understand is that a herald is going to look at a hill or a mountain and say, you know what? That one needs to be moved. And I know what you're probably thinking. Back then, you'd move a mountain? Well, some of you, how many of you have heard of the verse, faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain? Right? And we're always taught that that verse means all you need is like this amount of faith. You just need a faith the size of the smallest seed, and you could like move a mountain. Well, can I just tell you, if you look at that with like rabbinic eyes, if you actually look at that in context to history, the king during the time of Jesus, King Herod, he was an amazing architect. Just look at King Herod's temple. Just look at the Masada. You can Google this. But he wanted a summer place. And King Herod created his summer home outside of Jerusalem, and he called it the Herodian. It was massive. And he found two mountains that he really, really liked. But as he began to build it, he realized one of those mountains is blocking my view, and the other mountain that I really like isn't tall enough. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to hire all of these workers, and we're going to take down that mountain, and we're actually going to move it so that the Herodian can be even bigger. And the idea was that everyone in Jerusalem could see, even when Herod was on vacation, that he was still watching them. And so when Jesus goes, hey, you can have faith the size of a mustard seed and move a mountain, he's talking about Herod, who had no faith, that he literally could move a mountain. And so what a herald would do was like look in this area and go, you know what, this mountain, it's got to be moved. It's too dangerous. This hill, we got to bring it down. And think about this. How are mountains actually created? It's actually by tectonic force. It's pressure, and these tectonic plates begin to push. And when I think about mountains, I think about unexpected pressure. And the truth is, for some apparent reason, this holiday season, it brings up so much pressure. Pressure that we got to have it all together. For some of us going into Q4, the fourth quarter of our business, we're like, man, I got to get this right. The numbers are just a little off, and you feel this pressure, and you start overworking. For some of you, you just feel this pressure. You see your kids' Christmas lists, and you're looking at your life going, man, I don't know where this money's coming from. For some of you, it's like, I'm just trying to keep everybody happy. For some of you, the unexpected pressures, you know that your in-laws are coming to spend multiple weeks at your house. And you're like, really? And you just got this moment, all this unexpected pressure. Or you feel the pressure to be out at every event, every party, every work function. And again, I don't want any of you to get to December 26th and go, I missed the king. And it can just be so easy. So easy. Any of you just feel that unexpected pressure building and building and building. And then verse 4 continues, and it says this, that there are these rough grounds, and they shall become level, and the rugged places a plain. And again, if you've ever walked the trails in the Middle East, and you ever done hiking there, you will know that those trails are very narrow, and oftentimes there are these edges, and the edges are so dangerous that if they're not level, and you're thinking about a chariot coming through, it could get like stuck. There could be a boulder. And if it gets stuck, it could tip over. And those edges can be so dangerous. And they got to go make sure that that whole ground is just level. That they're actually protecting so that the king can get from point A to point B in the safest and most efficient way possible. And when I think about edges, I think about these rough places, I think about this season can often bring up unexpected emotion. For some of us, the holiday season, it just triggers us. It brings out anger within us. It brings out sadness in us. It brings out envy and bitterness. And oftentimes in family units, we all begin to learn the sacred art of dancing around one person or multiple people in our family's chaos. And we don't talk about this. and we don't actually discuss this, and the ground is not level, all we try to do is not get close to the edge. You know that almost 1,000 people every year die because they're getting towards the edge of the Grand Canyon or some cliff in San Diego or some mountain, and they're finding themselves with a selfie stick trying to get the shot of the sun setting, and they literally fall off the cliff. Edges are dangerous. And the truth is, every one of us has an edge. And somehow in this season, when we're going and working and doing, we miss out on what the King wants to do in us, and we react. We lash out. We let our stress and our worry and our fear get the best of us. And the Herald is here to tell you, man, you got to bring that before God. You got to bring that before God. What's your valley? Unexpected loss. What's your mountain? Unexpected pressure. What's your edge in this season? That unexpected emotion that gets lashed out. And I want you to understand that the Herald says, man, there's something better. He says this in verse 5 so powerfully, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all the people will see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. And here's what this Herald is saying. The glory, it's going to be revealed. And every person is going to have the invitation to see it together. And I love this word glory. In Hebrew, it's the word kavod. Kavod. And it literally means weightiness. There is a weight to this moment. There is something profound and beautiful in this moment. And again, for many of us, we go through this holiday season, and God is revealing himself. And the King is wanting to do something in and through it, but the truth be told, we miss it. We miss what he wants to do. And the beauty of the scriptures, it teaches us that God is here. And if God is here, that means every moment's brimming with redemptive potential. It's brimming with revelation. It's brimming with restoration and renewal. And the opportunity for us is, will we say yes to what God wants to do? And there are these moments of divine weightiness. In the Celtic tradition, they call it a thin place, where heaven and earth are dancing together. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I experienced this on Thursday at the Thanksgiving table. My wife, this artist, she created these like gratitude cards. There's 11 of us. And I've got, brother-in-laws that have been through rehab. A lot of my family doesn't know Jesus yet. And my wife just said, hey, I want you to speak something about what you're grateful for the person to the left of you. And it was so beautiful and it was so profound. And then at this moment, when it got to the end, my wife just lifted a glass and she simply said, and there's one man who's not here today. And she began to speak of my father. And I had thought about my dad, but there was just this moment to hear my wife speak of the goodness and the redemption that happened in my dad's life that just felt weighty. A couple weeks ago, I was speaking in Indianapolis, and at the end of the teach, there's a little line, and this older gentleman comes up, and he's with a 20-something, and I didn't know what to expect in the conversation, but I simply introduced myself. They introduced themselves, and the older gentleman goes, do you know who this guy is? I'm like, no, I don't. I'm sorry. He goes, this guy for the last 4 years has been in prison. I was like, wow. He just got out 3 weeks ago. I was like, wow, that's incredible. And for the last 4 years, I've been smuggling in your teachings to his prison. And I've been getting them off YouTube and online, and I've been bringing them to the prison, and he's been listening. And then he gets out, and I told him you were coming to Indianapolis, and so we drove here to hear you teach. And then I was like, oh my goodness. And in this moment, it got so weighty. And then the guy looks at me, the kid looks at me and goes, I got 2 words for you, Steve. I said, what are they? He goes, Rock Shazak. And I was like, oh my goodness. And here's this moment, right? It was just like, it was this moment, and people are like, what's he talking about? You got to come to church. Now, here's the thing. There's this moment where all of a sudden, I just thought it was an average moment, and all of a sudden, like that, it became weighty. And when I think about glory, I think about glory being expected weightiness. See, in this season, we ought to have the expectation that God wants to do something in and through us. That our eyes, our ears, our lives should be open to what God wants to reveal in us and what he wants to show the people around us. But the truth be told, if we've got all these valleys that we're not dealing with, or these mountains, or these edges, we're going to miss out on the glory. And for me, when I think about Advent, the preparation plus anticipation is to deal with the valleys, the mountains, the edges, so that we can experience the glory. And every time you walk into the church, are you expectant? Every time you walk into your home in this season, are you expectant? Every time you walk through your neighborhood, are you expectant for the King to arrive? For there to be this weightiness? And I kid you not, the most sincere Christ followers who don't miss moments are the ones who are expectant to see and experience God's weightiness. But friends, I'm here to tell you, I'm just a simple guy. And I got my own valleys. I got my own mountains. I got my own edges. But I have a desire in my heart to not miss the King's arrival this year. I just want you to take a moment. I just want you to think just for a second. Are you going into this Advent season experiencing unexpected loss? Maybe something that's just happened in this past season. You didn't see it coming. Or maybe for some of you, you're going into this Christmas season and you're just feeling this pressure. You just feel it. And all your RPMs, they're just rising and rising and rising, and the stress. Or maybe you just experience these edges. Quick with your just words. And you're not safe. And I'm telling you what, the King in this season wants to bring good news to you. He wants you to expect the weightiness of his truth and his healing and his love for you. But can I take it even farther? Because the truth is, this whole message is one double entendre. Double entendre, you know what that means? It just is something that has multiple interpretations. See, in one way, you're the congregation, you're the city in which I'm here telling you as a herald that the King is coming and the King wants to meet with you. But truth be told, every single one of you is also the herald. Every single one of you is the John the Baptist for today. And every single one of you has the invitation and the opportunity to prepare the way for somebody else. And let me just be really, really clear. The people that you are encountering in the marketplace or in your city or in your school, many of them have experienced the valley. Many of them are experiencing this pressure. Many of them are struggling with not being able to control the emotions that are just happening within them. And yet you just like John the Baptist, are out preparing the way and telling that there is a King who has come and who is coming, who can make all things right. A King who turns crooked roads into straight paths. A King who brings peace and grace and love and truth. I mean, just quick time out. How many of you, with a show of hands, started coming to church during Christmas or Easter? If you're like really, really honest, show of hands. Okay, yeah. And then how many of you started coming to Foundations because somebody invited you? Show of hands. Just raise those hands. Look around. Okay, just think about this. Somebody went up and actually played the role of John the Baptist and said, hey, come with me. And maybe they were going through a valley at that moment. Maybe they were having these mountains, this pressure, something wasn't going right. Maybe they were struggling with anxiety or these emotions that are just real. And somehow someone had the courage to say, hey, why don't you come with me? And truth be told, Christmas and Easter are the easiest invites. And when we talk about the light has come, it didn't just come for your valleys and your mountains and your edges. It came to be revealed so that every single person would see the glory together. And I'll tell you what, when a church actually expects the weightiness of God to show up, something happens. When the church actually doesn't have faith the size of a mustard seed, like Herod had, but they literally have the faith to say, God has done something in my valley. God has done something with my mountain. God has done something with my edges. And you know what? I think he can do something with you. Something begins to happen. So here's what I'm asking of you. What's your valley? What's your mountain? What's your edge? But even more than that, who in your life are you praying for in this season to experience the glory of the Lord? The glory of God sending his son, the glory of the King arriving in their heart and in their mind and transforming their life. Who are you pleading, begging, longing for God to set free? And who are you actually stepping out and taking that risk to make an invite? And I know, I talked with Pastor Carl yesterday as Ohio State was beating me, and he was fired up. And he was telling me about his Christmas message. And I think this Christmas season is going to be one that's really, really special for Foundations. And I'm just asking you, would you be courageous? Would you be like John the Baptist? Would you prepare the way for not just you to encounter more of God, but for others around you? And when you live into that, and you get to see and experience others proclaiming the good, good Father that has transformed your life, I'll tell you what, this church, just be one of those special, special moments. Special, special seasons. And so, God, we come before you right now. Prepare our hearts. Let us anticipate with great expectation what you want to do in this season, in us, in our valleys, with our mountains, with our edges. Allow your weightiness to set us free. But God, also what you want to do through us. There's some people who have been coming to Foundations, they just haven't shown up in the last couple of weeks. And one of the easiest ways is we can just pick up the phone and say, hey, we haven't seen you. They might be going through a valley. And we got to be the church. We got to be those forest of redwoods for each other. And so, God, I pray that we would play that role of John the Baptist. We would prepare the way. We would expect to see your glory revealed during this season in new and fresh ways. So here we are, God. Use us, all for your glory. And all God's people said, amen.